The stars had long since dimmed for the galaxy. What was once a vast network of thriving civilizations. Planets spun with light. Spaceways vibrant with commerce, diplomacy, and discovery had collapsed under the weight of despair. System by system, culture by culture, the old order had died, devoured not by war, not even by internal corruption, but by a force without origin, reason, or mercy. They were called the Scourge, a name too weak for what they were. No one knew where they came from. No treaties could be brokered, no weapon deterred them. Entire fleets vanished into black, with no final transmissions, no wreckage. Worlds screamed until they didn't. Cities were pulled apart in silence. Even the most advanced empires, those with stellar engineering, biological immortality, minds larger than moons, crumbled. The galaxy did what civilizations always did in their final hours. They pleaded. They panicked. They prayed. None of it mattered. LSR of Caith Prime watched the last of her ships fall from the great glass viewport of the Council Citadel. The flickering lights of battle disappeared one by one, until only the void remained. Her command was a whisper now, her fleet reduced to scattered shuttles and frightened refugees. Still, she stood in full regalia, her golden armor dull with ash and age, and her voice unshaken. "This is the end," she said, speaking into a galactic-wide transmission. "We fought. We failed. But in our last breath, we remember. Once there was light. On 1,000 crumbling worlds, beings of every shape and culture watched her farewell. Some wept. Others merely closed their eyes. Somewhere in the cold reaches beyond the Sagittarius Divide, a small alien child turned to her father and asked, "Will we all die too?" There was no answer. The Scourge did not speak, did not gloat, did not conquer. It simply consumed. And now, even the last light, the Caith, had gone dark. But in the distant reaches of void space, beyond the limits of known hyperspace relays, a ship stirred. It had no name in any current database, and the stars around it bore no designations on modern charts. It moved slowly, methodically, like something waking from a long, deliberate sleep. Inside, something watched. Not one, but many. They were human, not the weak, fragile species that first crawled into the stars, begging for relevance. These were older, leaner, honed by exile, by silence, by vision. They had disappeared over 1,000 years ago, not lost, but choosing to vanish as whispers of a coming storm grew louder in the deep places of the universe. While others debated and denied, humanity had done what it always did when cornered. It adapted. It prepared. And now it was ready. High Admiral Revik stood alone on the bridge of the Soul's End, his silhouette framed by the holographic projection of a dying spiral arm. His uniform was black, simple, marked only with a silver sigil, Earth, split and reforged. Around him, officers moved without sound, without command. Orders were rarely spoken aloud anymore. A comms officer approached. Young, barely 40 by appearance, though older by experience. "Sir," she said, "we received a wideband distress transmission, dated 2 hours ago, from Caith Prime." Revik didn't turn. Content. Final message. Standard surrender protocol. Last stand has failed. Civilian centers lost. Council collapse confirmed. A pause. And the Scourge? No resistance left. They begun full consumption of the sector. Estimated 1 week before they breached the inner rim. Revik closed his eyes. So it had come to this. "Are we ready?" he asked. The officer straightened. All battle groups confirm readiness. The Vanguard is pre-aligned through fold space. Sub-channel resonance weapons are charged. AI command cores are online and contained. And the Armada? 300 ships. No losses. At last, Revik turned. He was not young, though his body showed no sign of age. His eyes were the giveaway, gray, sharp, and endless. A man who had seen centuries stretch before him like a ledger. "Broadcast to all known galactic relays," he said. "Text only. Use legacy protocol." The officer hesitated. "Legacy, sir?" Revik nodded once. "They've forgotten what we are. It's time they remembered." She didn't ask more. She turned and sent the message. Moments later, in 1,000 scattered pockets of the galaxy, refugees and soldiers alike watched as every active comm channel blinked, cracked, and displayed 5 simple words. No signature, no coordinates, no confirmation. We are coming. Earth. The reactions varied. On the shattered decks of the Aurelian Arch, a fleet commander dropped his knees. In the ruins of the Zari Nebula, a scientist whispered, "Impossible." On a dying world orbiting a red dwarf, a boy looked at the sky and smiled. And deep within the Scourge Hive network, something paused. Not fear, for it could not feel, but calculation. A pattern long buried reawakened. A match, distant, ancient, and unanticipated. The Scourge adapted. That was its strength. But humanity had changed too. Revik watched as the last coordinates locked into the fleet's navigation core. He felt the pulse ripple through the command deck. No adrenaline, no trembling. They had transcended that long ago. He whispered, more to himself and his crew. We told them we were gone. We let them forget. We let them sleep. The stars beyond the viewport bent, folding like silk. Now we wake them. In an instant, the fleet vanished, leaving only silence behind. And for the first time in generations, the galaxy dared to hope. But hope was just the beginning. The relay station drifted in absolute darkness, orbiting a dead star whose light had long since vanished from the cosmic record. Nothing lived in the system, no planets, no moons, not even dust of market silence. Yet here, buried in forgotten coordinates, a signal pulsed. Riven Meckel adjusted the gain on the ancient receiver console. His fingers trembled, not from fear, but from disbelief. For 17 cycles, he had manned this outpost, a relic from a forgotten alliance. No ships came. No transmissions arrived. The universe had grown cold, and so had hope, but the signal was real. It repeated every 30 seconds, a narrow band pulse encoded in an obsolete Terran format, one not used in over a millennium. He hadn't seen this language since his academy days, buried in an appendix titled Dead Civilizations. And now, it whispered again through static. Signal origin, Earth. Status mobilizing. He stared at it for a long time, mouth dry, heart pounding his chest like it had remembered how to beat. He reached for the comms relay, already knowing the other end would likely be ashes and silence. But protocol demanded he try. He was halfway through the emergency broadcast when the lights flickered. Riven turned slowly. Outside the viewport, where only black had ever been, the stars twisted. One by one they emerged. Not ships in the conventional sense. Not crude hulls with visible engines or heat signatures. These were constructs of gravity and geometry, massive in scale and silent as death. They moved in perfect formation, not as individuals, but as a singular intelligence stretched across hundreds of kilometers. Riven's breath caught. He stepped forward, hand unconsciously brushing against his worn officer's badge. A voice, calm, human, and ancient, spoke through the station speakers. Relay Alpha 12. Stand down. Acknowledge presence of Terran Command Fleet. His knees buckled. Terran Command Fleet. The words belonged to history books, to myths. He struggled upright. This is Officer Meckel of the Galactic Outwatch. You're supposed to be extinct. A pause. Then a quieter reply. We are not what we were. We are what we needed to become. The connection severed. Meckel barely noticed. He was already transmitting the coordinates to every surviving relay in the network. Far across the ruined sectors of the galaxy, survivors received the signal. The Terrans had returned, not as refugees, not as diplomats, as a war fleet. On the bridge of Soul's End, High Admiral Revik moved with precision. Each motion a thread in a dance rehearsed across centuries. The holographic tactical array displayed known Scourge vectors, now visibly adjusting in reaction to the Terran fleet's appearance. They were aware. Good. Commander Lissavar stood beside him, silent until she dared break the stillness. They're reacting faster than expected. They remember us, Revik said, without pride. Not clearly. They remember enough to be afraid. Liz studied the data, her expression distant. The Scourge consumed over half the galactic core in under 3 decades. Our intelligence models predicted no foreign intervention could slow them. And they were right, Rivik said. No foreign force could. She looked up. You think we're something else now. I know we are. She didn't argue. In truth, none of them were fully human anymore. Not in the way the galaxy had last seen them. Humanity had evolved not just biologically or technologically, but philosophically. The trauma of the early centuries, their near extinction, their exile from the galactic stage, had forced them to abandon notions of identity and preservation. They had embraced inevitability. They had become instruments of it. Rivik gestured toward the helm. Begin Phase 1. Show them what silence bought us. List turned to the command interface. All wings. Prepare to engage. Initiate full spectrum cloak drop. Weapons hot. AI cores unleashed on perimeter detail. Do not engage enemy hostiles unless provoked. In the black void, the Terran ships lit up, not with fire or cannon flashes, but with light that bent physics. Structures shifted, revealing inner cores of weaponized matter logic. The very laws of the universe repurposed for destruction. The Scourge arrived in response. Hundreds of them, ranging from scout drones to hive minds with planetary mass. The void shimmered with their unnatural forms. And then the first shot was fired, not from humanity, from the Scourge. A beam of compressed dark energy lanced across the system, aimed directly at Sol's End. The human ship didn't move. Instead, a field shimmered around it, absorbing the beam into a recursive containment lattice. Rivik nodded. Response time, 3.6 seconds, List reported. They become more efficient. Not enough. He raised a hand. A moment later, 20 human ships flickered forward like thoughts made real. They didn't fly. They transitioned, skipping across space in pulses of non-local probability. When they rematerialized inside the Scourge's ranks, the results were immediate. Scourge construct imploded, compressed into singularities. Others detonated in reverse time bursts, aging into collapse. One, larger than a moon, simply stopped existing. To the outside galaxy, it was a massacre. But to Rivik, it was simply the first move. On Caith Prime, LSR watched the broadcast through cracked holoscreens as the remnants of her people crowded the underground bunkers. The transmission was choppy, but real. Footage of the battle. The impossible Terran ships, the unmaking of the enemy, had made its way into the refugee networks in under an hour. She stared at the image of a lone Terran vessel hovering above a dead world, untouched, unshaken. A general at her side murmured, "They came back." She didn't turn. "Yes." Another voice, weak from the back, asked, "What do they want?" LSR finally faced them all. "I don't know," she said, "but I believe what they don't want is a dead galaxy." Her words fell like a spark into dry grass. Across Caith Prime, survivors began to move again. Not as a mob, not in panic, in preparation. Rivik stood at the viewing deck, once the last of the Scourge ships fell. The battle had taken less than 20 minutes. The void around them was littered with residual anomalies. No debris, no bodies. Just absence. "Relay the message," he said quietly. List nodded. "Content." He didn't hesitate. "Sector cleansed. Coordinates available. Stand. Rebuild. Do not forget who we are." She sent it. The fleet moved on, deeper into the dying heart of the galaxy, where the real war waited. This was only the threshold. But now, the door had opened, and behind it stood the last weapon hope had left. Humanity. LSR stood beneath the shattered dome of the Caith War Council, surrounded by the dying echoes of her civilization. The air reeked of scorched metal and broken promises. Around her, the remnants of the great houses argued in hushed, desperate tones, voices frayed by years of retreat. They had seen the Terrans descend like wraiths from myth, and now they waited for salvation or domination. She raised her hand. Silence fell. "We don't have the luxury to question their motives," she said. "Only their effectiveness." A murmur of unease rippled through the chamber. "They annihilated a Scourge fleet in less than half an hour," said Tolenmek, commander of the once mighty Arkan Armada. "And then they vanished. They didn't even wait for gratitude." They didn't come for thanks, Elisar replied. They came for the enemy. And when the enemy is gone, Tolan asked, do we become the next threat? Elisar met his gaze. We gave up. They didn't. If you want to fear something, fear that difference. Before anyone could answer, the room's central console pulsed. A transmission. Every face turned. A Terran signal. The display flared with a shifting, static read figure. Human, clad in black, face hidden beneath a thin veil of shifting nanoglass. Only the voice emerged, clear and resonant. This is Command Unit Theta. You are prepared defensive logistics for integration. Human fleet reinforcements will arrive in 72 hours. Coordinates will follow. Accept upgrade protocol or be bypassed. No room for negotiation. No plea for alliance. Tolan bristled. They issue commands as if we are their vassals. Elisar studied the transmission. They don't see us as subjects. They see us as tools in a war they can't afford to lose. The figure flickered, then vanished. Across the surviving territories, similar messages unfurled. The Terrans moved like precision instruments, not liberators. They offered technology measured in revolutions, plasma lattice fortifications, quantum temporal field disruptors, automated logistics. But with each gift came an unspoken expectation. Comply or stay out of the way. On a war-torn mining moon in the Yelra system, a young Tren warrior named Vex stepped through the newly deployed Terran outpost gates. He had fought for years with scavenged weapons and blind desperation. Now he walked beside human soldiers whose armor shimmered with reactive memory thread alloys, and whose eyes glowed faintly with neural augmentation. His guide, a woman named Rhea, moved with eerie quiet. She barely seemed to breathe, and when she spoke, her voice had the cadence of someone who had rehearsed every word before speaking it aloud. "You're the Resistance Cell leader?" she asked. Vex nodded. "What's left of it?" Rhea handed him a data core. "That's the tactical schema for converting your insurgent bands into viable strike units. We've analyzed your engagements. You're courageous, undisciplined, but functional." He stared at the glowing disk. "You think you can teach us how to win?" She met his eyes without blinking. "We don't teach. We upgrade." Rhea stepped back and gestured. From the Terran staging dome behind her, the armor came forward, not carried, not worn, but walking, like a second skin choosing its host. It halted before Vex. "You accept?" she asked. He hesitated, then reached out. The armor wrapped around him without ceremony. Cold, smooth, then a rush. Data flooded his mind. Threat vectors, probability charts, trajectory models. The suit didn't obey him. It partnered with him. Vex stumbled forward, heart pounding. "Is this AI?" "No," Rhea said. "It's you, unfiltered." Across the reclaimed zones, similar stories unfolded. Resistance leaders turned into tacticians. Pilots became generals. Medics became battlefield surgeons with nanite swarms at their command. It wasn't just a war of force. It was evolution accelerated by necessity. But not everyone accepted the gift. In the fractal cities of the Trinari, where culture was reserved like ancient scripture, High Curator Alla refused integration. He saw the Terrans not as saviors, but as catalysts of erasure. They burned the disease, he told his advisors, but they also scorched the patient. The Terrans didn't argue. They simply left. And 3 days later, the Scourge returned to that system. There were no survivors. Back aboard Soul's End, Revik stood before the Grand Strategy Array. The Scourge were adapting again, pushing further into the Helix corridors, using biological worm ships armed with dimensionally phased armor. Casualties among non-integrated forces rose by 12% in just 2 days. Commander lists entered with a data slate. Kate defensive protocols have been fully upgraded. Yelra resistance is now operating at 64% synchronization. Trinari refused aid. Confirmed loss. Revik absorbed the report without comment. "Send a strike group to the Helix Vector," he said. "Target their forward hive structure. I want them disassembled before they mutate further." Liz hesitated. "You intend to deploy the sleeper weapon?" "We're past testing. This is war." She nodded. "Understood." Revik watched her leave. He didn't feel satisfaction. He felt the weight of inevitability. They had known for centuries the Scourge would reach this phase. The enemy's strength was not their numbers, but their recursion. Every time they failed, they evolved. Every time they lost, they learned. Humanity had become the only variable they hadn't accounted for in their equations of conquest, and that Revik knew was the only advantage they had. On Caith Prime, Elisar stood on the new perimeter wall, where Terran alloy glistened in the light of a repaired sky shield. She watched as her soldiers, no, her allies, trained under human coordination. They were sharper now, faster, fearful still, but capable. A Terran lieutenant approached and offered her a tactical bracer. You've been designated as a sector vanguard. You're cleared for Tier 3 coordination. She took it slowly. Do you people always assign leadership? We assess need and capability. You were chosen. She slipped the device on. Its interface synced to her neural pattern, displaying troop readiness, supply lines, orbital threat maps, and something else. A projection of the enemy's main hive, still untouched, still waiting. Why show me this? She asked. The lieutenant's eyes narrowed faintly. Because you'll be among the first to go there. The wind howled over the shattered plains. In the distance, Terran drop cruisers carved the sky like blades. Elisar stared at the high projection. For the first time since the fall began, she didn't feel powerless. She felt necessary. And the galaxy, long broken, began to breathe again. The void above Hive Prime shimmered with unnatural light. Colors that had no name, frequencies that twisted sensors into static. At the galaxy's heart, the Scourge had built its throne, a living fortress grown from consumed worlds. It pulsed with sentient malice, its surface writhing with biomechanical tendrils that scraped against the thin veil of real space. And above it, the Terran fleet arrived, not in formation, but in synchrony. Ships folded into existence like pages being turned in a book no longer bound by time. They did not roar or flash or burn. They simply appeared, monolithic, silent, inevitable. High Admiral Revik stood alone on the bridge of Soul's End, watching the anomaly below. He had seen enemy strongholds before. None felt like this. This wasn't a command center. It was awareness. A planetary mass devoted to hunger. And it knew they were coming. Lissavar entered, armor-sealed, eyes cold. The sleeper weapon is primed. Detonation on your mark. Revik didn't turn to face her. Initiating sleeper now would shatter the core system. It might kill the hive. She frowned. Isn't that the point? No, it might wound it. And if we fail, the Scourge will learn from what we tried. It'll never be vulnerable in this way again. Liz stepped forward. Then what do? We take the heart, Revik said. Directly. No proxies. No artillery. We enter. And we end it from within. She stared at him. That wasn't in any plan. Neither was surviving long enough to have a final assault. Across the fleet, the message went out. This was the last operation. The true campaign. Below, the surface of the hive began to open. Not from attack. From invitation. Vex, now commander of the integrated Yoran strike cohort, stood in the drop bay of Ashwind, his armor humming with barely contained potential. The suit had changed him. Not just physically, he was faster now, stronger, but mentally, he saw threats before they manifested. He read tactics like stories. And he understood the Terrans in a way he once feared he never would. Beside him stood Rhea, silent and impassive. Her presence was a tether to something older than war, something human. You realize this could be a trap? He said. Everything about the Scourge is a trap, she replied. But this is their last one. The bay doors opened. Gravity inverted. They descended. Into the hive. The inner sanctum of the Scourge defied logic. Geometry twisted. Distance lied. Time itself buckled in places, stretching seconds into minutes, compressing entire movements into flashes. But the Terran troops and those they had uplifted, adapted, their suits adjusted, recalibrating to flux conditions. Their minds, augmented and sharpened, pierced illusion. It wasn't enough to fight the Scourge's body. They had to confront its mind. Elisar moved through the organic corridors of the Hive with a precision that belied her former life as a politician. Now, she was a warrior leader, a symbol to the scattered. Her sector vanguard bracer flickered with readings, enemy nodes, spawn vectors, psionic anomalies. They were close. Her strike team was small, efficient, cross-species. Human, Kaida and Yorin. Each had been transformed by integration. No longer survivors. Now catalysts. They entered the central core chamber, and the Hive spoke, not with sound, with memory. Visions crashed into their minds. Planets devoured. Civilizations crumbling under waves of teeth and code. A billion screams layered into a single thought. We are the final function. Elisar staggered, blood dripping from her nose. The others braced. Vex nearly collapsed, his neural interface flooding with past defeats. Rhea stood tall. "We do not accept your equation," she said, voice echoing beyond sound. The chamber changed. The walls pulsed, revealing a being at its center. Not a queen, not a leader, a nexus. The Scourge's intelligence condensed into a core, suspended above a yawning chasm of collapsing matter. It saw them, it knew them, and it adapted. Tendrils lashed out. The fight began, not with weapons, but with will. The Terrans moved as one. Vex engaged the mind limbs with temporal distortion blades, each strike folding moments into milliseconds. Elisar launched coordinated strikes with AI-assisted targeting, every round finding a nerve cluster. Rhea unleashed a psychic pulse from her neural spine, disrupting the Hive's thought patterns. Revik watched from orbit, seeing the data in real time. Weapon systems converging on core, Liz reported. "Not yet," he said. The battle stretched. The Hive pushed back with memories of extinction, with despair weaponized. It showed each warrior their world's fall, their people's last breaths, their own final moments. Elisar refused it. "We are not defined by endings," she growled. She surged forward and plunged a spike of encoded hope into the core, her own memory of survival, of Kaith Prime rising again, of voices singing as the shields went up. The Hive screamed. It cracked. "Now," Revik said. Soul's End released the final payload. Not a bomb, a signal. The sleeper, not a weapon of death, but awakening, ignited across the Scourge's mindscape, broadcasting human resilience at a molecular level. Hope encoded, defiance weaponized, identity unyielding. The Hive convulsed. And then it died. The tendrils collapsed. The psychic storm ceased. The Scourge across the galaxy began to falter, cut from their nexus. Some simply crumbled. Others fled into deep space, directionless. The war ended not in fire, but in reclamation. In the aftermath, Elisar stood once more beneath a different sky, one not yet mapped. Survivors gathered at the edge of a new world, one the Terrans called Haven. They planted flags, not of conquest, but of remembrance. Vex taught strategy to those who had once only known retreat. Rhea walked among the stars, a living emissary of change. And Revik, he returned to silence, not because he was tired, because his purpose had been fulfilled. The galaxy had not simply been saved. It had been reminded why it was worth saving.